What's up, kitchen table wizards? What's up, deck brewers from all over the world? You know I like janky decks. You know I like alternate win conditions. So this time I built for you a top 25 list of alternate win conditions. Now, this list isn't based on power, no, it's based on my personal flavor and my personal preference. And if you like to see some janky brews, well, make sure to check out my playlist with janky decks as well. Now, make sure to give the video a like and let me know which deck you prefer in the comments, and maybe in the future I will brew for you a nice janky combo deck with an alternative win condition. Before I start, I do want to give an honorable mention to this card. Revel in Riches. It didn't make my list, but I do want to give a shout out to the card, as I think it's a cool card. It just not feeling it. Not reveling in the riches. No. Alright, top 25 alternate win conditions. Here we go, and we start at number 25 with Barren Glory, an enchantment that at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control no other permanents other than Barren Glory and you have no cards in your hand, you win the game. Because the only perfect world is an empty world, apparently. Now, how can we brew around this? Because when I saw this card for the first time, I said this is impossible. But wait, I have found a nice deck list on the internet that gives us some inspiration. The first thing we want to do when we play a Barren Glory is get rid of it. We want to put it in exile using Banishing Light, Quarantine Field,
a quarantine,
or an Oblivion Ring. Now, once we've done that, we destroy everything. And when we destroy everything, when our Barren Glory is in exile, it will come back. And we can destroy everything by using Bearer of Heavens, Obliterate, or World Fire. Now, I've also included some cards that work ideal to search for your combo. Diabolic Tutor can search for any card, Idyllic Tutor can search for your Banishing Light or your Barren Glory, Enlightened Tutor does the same, and Demonic Tutor is the catch-all tutor that gives you any card you want. Now, there is another way to build this deck, and that's by using Greater Gargadon. It's a beast that has Suspend, so that means you play it, it gets exiled with time counters on it. And you can sacrifice an artifact, creature or land to remove a time counter from the Greater Gargadon. So you spend it for 1 and then you remove everything, you remove your whole board and then you win. If you still have cards in your hand, that's not a big problem. You just play 1 with nothing and discard also your hand. Next up, we are going to discuss on number 24, the Hedron Alignment. Now, what seems like another impossible win condition can easily made possible with cards that have Delve, because you do need to remove one of those Hedron Alignments from the game as well. You need to get it in exile. And then when you have 1 on the battlefield, 1 in your hand and 1 in the graveyard, you also win the game. Now, getting it on the battlefield into your hand or your graveyard is not that big of a deal, but getting it exiled was a bit more difficult, but you can do it using cards that have Delve, like Murderous Cut, Dead Drop, Dig Through Time, Set Adrift, or Treasure Cruise. I would also definitely include a Tasigur the Golden Fang in this deck, because this is also a way to get it back from out of your graveyard into your hand and then maybe later onto the battlefield. Number 23 for me is Approach of the Second Sun. It's a sorcery, and when you cast it, you gain 7 life, and then you put it back 7th from the top. Now, when you play this spell for the second time, you win the game. Of course, usually you have to wait a few turns to draw it again. But this card, Licious Mastery, really helps, because whenever you gain life, you draw that many cards. So, if you play Approach, you will also be drawing 7 cards and you'll get the Approach back immediately. So if you have enough mana, you can immediately play it and win the game, or you just play it on the next turn and win the game. Oh yeah, Licious Mastery helps because you can't lose the game when this enchantment is on the battlefield. Just make sure that meanwhile you don't lose too much life. Do you like counters? Well, at number 22, I put a lot of alternative win conditions with counters. Simic Ascendancy needs 20 counters to win you the game. Helix Pinnacle needs 100 counters to win you the game. And the Darksteel Reactor is an indestructible artifact that also needs you to have 20 or more charge counters on it to win you the game. Now when I say counters, I say Simic, meaning playing with green and blue. The following cards were great in the deck. Phage the Imaginative Rascal gives you an extra counter on it, so the speed will be a lot faster to get the counters accumulated. Deep Glow Skate doubles the amount of counters you have on any permanent you own. And with Doubling Season, if an effect would place 1 or more counters on a permanent you control, it places twice that many counters on it. Inexorable Tide is also a great enchantment that whenever you cast a spell, you get an additional counter on a permanent that already has a counter on it. Of course, if you're a commander player and you like to include this win condition, make sure to play Revel of the Hulklade. It also doubles a number of counters on target artifact, creature or land. Now when you play this, focus on the Darksteel Reactor, because the other two are enchantments and then Revel doesn't really work. From counters we go to number 21, to life gain. Test of Endurance and Felidar Sovereign are both alternative win conditions where you have to have a specific number of life to win you the game at your upkeep. With the test it's 50 and with the Crazy Cat it's 40. Now my deck that plays the Felidar Sovereign has an Alhammaret's Archive. It also included an Elixir of Immortality and for defense a Riot Control. Now for a life gain deck I usually like the colors white and in this case also green. Do you like Planeswalkers? Well, I also have an alternative win condition that includes the big bad Nicol Bolas. Nicol Bolas, Dragon God from War of the Spark, is a 5 mana Planeswalker in black, blue and red, and its ultimate ability is -8 each opponent who doesn't control a legendary creature or Planeswalker loses the game. Now sometimes you just need to get to the ultimate, but what if your opponent is playing Planeswalkers? Then you have of course the Elder spell, destroy any number of target Planeswalkers. Choose a Planeswalker you control, Nicol Bolas maybe, to put 2 loyalty counters on it for each Planeswalker destroyed this way. So even if you play a Planeswalker deck yourself, you can use this to kill your own Planeswalkers and to get to Nicol Bolas' ultimate even faster. Number 19 needs an intro with some music. Mortal Combat is an enchantment that costs 4 mana, and at the beginning of your upkeep, if you control 20 or more creature cards in your graveyard, you win the game. Now 20 or more creature cards in your graveyard, that's a lot, but luckily we have this guy, Inami Death Aspect. When it comes into play, you may search your library for any number of spirit cards and put them into your graveyard. That's the answer. You just need to make sure to have a spirit deck with say 25 or 30 creatures in it, and then make sure you protect your Mortal Kombat and your Inami. I would go for the colors black, white and blue. At number 18 we have Vraska. Now there are some different Vraskas printed, but most of them have something similar. They need a creature, and when that creature deals combat damage, it will destroy your opponent. Now apparently Vraska had a thing with Jace. Now I don't know if the relationship is built to last with this kind of attitude, to be honest. Okay, let's see some cards that work well with Vraska. You want to deal combat damage, so you want to have your assassins or attacking creatures being unblockable. You can use artifacts like a Whisper Silk Cloak that not only make it unblockable but also protect it from spells. Rogue's Passage is a really cool land that sneaks in some damage. And then there are some unblockable cards like a Dimir Infiltrator or an Agent of Horizons that work really well in this deck. Up next we have a Near Death Experience, another enchantment for 5 mana, and at the beginning of your upkeep, if you have exactly 1 life, you win the game. Now how do we get at 1 life before we get at 0 life? Now there are a lot of cards in black where we can pay life to get something in return. I'm thinking about Necropotent or Wall of Blood. Of course you want to stay at 1 life as long as possible, and for that you can use Worship or maybe the ultimate ability of Serra the Benevolent. And just only for the art, I would already decide to include this card in my deck. At number 16 we have the Celestial Convergence, an old card from Prophecy. It costs 4 mana, it's an enchantment, and it comes into play with 7 omen counters on it. And at the beginning of your upkeep you remove a counter from it, and if you have no counters on it, the player with the highest life total wins the game. Okay, how do we get these counters from this enchantment as quickly as possible? We can use a Vampire Hexmage.
Oh, behave.
Or an Aether Snap to do that. So this will definitely be a black-white deck with a lot of life gain and those 2 black cards. Alternate win conditions can be found a lot of times in enchantments. And number 15 is no difference. Chance and Counter needs 10 or more luck counters on it to win you the game at the beginning of your upkeep, and whenever you win a coin flip, put a luck counter on the Chance and Counter. So of course you need Darksteel to help you win those coin flips. And you can also include cards like Frenetic Sliver, Orcish Captain and Ral Zarek to get you a lot of coin flips. This can be a really wacky deck in blue and red. Number 14 and number 13 have something in common. Let's start with the first one. Coalition Victory is a sorcery and it costs 8 mana. You win the game if you control a land of each basic land type and a creature of each color. Now recently we also have Happily Ever After. And I personally like this one even better. It costs 3 mana, only in white, gains you some life and draws you a card. So at least it does something when you play it. Now at the beginning of your upkeep, if there are 5 colors among permanents you control, so not only creatures, if there are 6 or more card types among permanents you control and or cards in your graveyard, and if your life total is greater than or equal to your starting life total, you win the game. So for both cards, you will need those 2 creatures. The Transguild Courier and the Sphinx of the Guild Pact are all colors, so it already checks that box of having permanents of all colors. With the Coalition Victory, you of course need some lands as well. And with Happily Ever After, you need to have more than your starting life and you need to have enough permanents and cards of different card types in your graveyard and on the battlefield. Number 12 is Phage the Untouchable.
You can't touch this.
Now, Phage can win you the game when it does combat damage to a player. That's rather easy, although the card costs 7 mana, but there's also a cool other ability. When it enters the battlefield, if you didn't cast it from your hand, you lose the game. But there is this card called Endless Whispers, and this enchantment gives each creature, when this creature is put into a graveyard from play, choose target opponent, and then that player puts this creature from that graveyard into play under his or her control. So when Phage dies, or when your opponent kills Phage, If you have the Endless Whispers out, he will immediately lose the game because he will gain control of Phage from the graveyard. At number 11 we have the Epic Struggle, and if you really like token strategies, this is a great card to build around, especially in green and white. White will help you look for your enchantments, and green will make you a bunch of tokens and will double your tokens. You can use cards like the Jade Mage or the Ant Queen and Parallel Evolution or Parallel Life to double the tokens. Now, of course, you can also add insult to injury by going infinite using a Squirrel Nest and Earthcraft. So this was part 1 of my alternative win conditions series. There are 10 more cards left, 10 more alternative win conditions I'm going to talk about in part 2. And if you like my video, make sure to give it a like and leave a comment below. I really hope to see you back for part 2. And remember, stay safe, and most important thing, always keep it casual. Bye!